Hi, I'm Andy Maddock, and we're going to start where we left off in the last video. We're going to start with the project that we have open, the Hello World project. And we're going to go over comments, variable naming, reserved words, different types of variables like strings, integers, floats, going over the type function. And we're going to go over adding and concatenating variables. So first, comments are used in coding so that you as a developer can either remind yourself or tell other developers what you're doing in certain sections of your code. In Python, they use a hash sign or a number sign to start the comment. So if you just place a number sign before the line, you can type in anything you want. And what that does is the compiler ignores that line. If you want to use multiple lines of comments, another way to do it in Python is use the 3 quotes. So there's 3 quotes start, 3 quotes end, and then anything in here is considered comments. So I can go to any of these lines, and it's going to ignore all that. So now if I hit the run button, you'll see at the bottom nothing came in here to run because it's not actually doing anything. It's just going through the comments, strips them all out, and there's nothing. Next, we'll talk about variable naming. So variables are representations of data within code. We have different types of variables that we'll go over in a minute, but first, how to name them. So you want to make sure that you don't use any spaces in your variable names. So let's try one. See variable 1, so var1, and then we're just going to make a string to start off with. A string is just a bunch of letters and numbers in quotes. Okay. So there we created a variable called var1 equals test this. Notice in the variable naming, we don't have any spaces. I can't do this. That's not going to work. And you should see it's underlined in red because it's not a correct variable format. The other thing I can't do is reserved words. Reserved words are words that are being used by Python for commands or functions. So like import, that's one of them. And see, as I start typing PyCharm is going to show me that that's a reserved word or a function. So that won't work. If I try to do that, it's showing it's in red here. Or print is a function, so that's not going to work either. And there's a number of reserved words, but basically when you type in PyCharm, it's going to let you know if that's a reserved word. You should make your variables meaningful. So maybe you want to name it something that represents what it is. Like maybe if this is the first name of something. First name equals Joe. Last name equals Smith. Like that. And you also can't, you have to start your variables with a letter. You can't start your variables with a number, so I can't say I can't say 1 first name. That's not going to work. See, it's highlighting in red, but I could say first name 1, last name 1, and then I could do a first name 2. Oops. So that's okay to do that. So if you are going to use numbers in your variables, it just can't be the first letter. So once again, going over the naming schema for variables, can't have spaces, no reserved words, and it has to start with a letter. So next, talked about reserved words. So the reserved words are functions within the program, like import, print, or whatever. And like I said, they'll show up as a different color, and that's a sign that it is a reserved word and you can't use it. The different types of variables, there's many different types of variables. The most common ones are strings, integers, floats. And there's a function called type that'll show you what type of variable you have on your screen. So let's go over that. So first we'll make a string. So I'll grab this one from up here, the first name, 1, which I made before. We'll put that down here. I'm going to remove this. So now I got first name 1 equals Joe. So this is a string. So if I want to print it, I'm going to use my print function again. And I'm going to put that variable in there. And then I'm going to hit the run button. And it's going to say it's Joe, right? Because I'm printing out the variable, which is equal to Joe. If I take this and I'm going to change it, so now it's first name is equal to 1, and then we're going to make a number. So number variable is equal to 1. So now I have a variable and it's equal to 1. 1 is an integer. Integers are whole numbers. And then I'm going to print that one out over here. And we're going to see what that does. And that's going to print 1. Now if I put it in quotes, it's still going to be 1, but it's now going to be a string. So look, it still prints out 1, but it's a string. So that matters when you're adding variables later, and we're going to do that after we go through this section, and you'll see why. If I want to use the type function, that'll tell me the type. So I can always do print and then use the type function. Put parentheses around it, get the variables. So this parentheses for the print, this one's for the type. Now when I do that, it's going to tell me what type of variable this number variable is. And it says it's a string. So it's a string because it has quotes around it. Now if I remove the quotes and then I hit run again, it's an integer now. See, class is int. Now if I change that and I put a decimal sign in there and I hit run, it's now a float. So floats have decimal signs in them, and integers are whole numbers. Okay. From there, now we're going to go and we're going to learn about adding variables. So adding or concatenating. If you're adding strings, it's called concatenating. That means putting two strings together. So we're going to take first name here. I'm going to bring that down there. Get rid of this. Okay, so now we have first name 1 equals Joe. And then last name 1 equals Smith. Okay, so those are our two variables. Now if I print, I'm going to do first name. So first name 1, and then I'm using a plus sign, and last name 1. So I'm going to print this variable plus this variable. What it's going to do is going to print Joe Smith, but there's going to be no space in there because there's no space here in the variables. So I hit run, and you see Joe Smith, no space in between. Now if I want to add a space in between, I just add in, I can either do it as a variable or a straight on string. I'll just do a straight string here with a space in it and a plus. So first name plus space plus last name, and that's going to print me Joe space Smith, just like this. If I want to make another variable called full name, I can do that here, and I do first name plus the space plus the last name. Now I have a variable called full name, and that's saved with the entire name with the space in it. And now I just print that one, and it's going to print the same thing here. Joe space Smith, because we have added it here. Now if I do this with numbers, it's a little bit different. So we're going to try this. We'll do number 1 equals 1. Number 2 equals 2. So now what I have here is two integers because they're whole numbers. One is called number 1. The variable is called number 1. The second one is called number 2. So if I do number 1, we'll do number 1 plus number 2. And that's going to add those variables together. Remember, they're integers because I don't have quotes around them. I hit the run button and it's going to give me 3. Now once I add quotes to those, it turns it to a string. So it's no longer going to add those numbers together. It's going to concatenate instead. So concatenate means it's going to merge the two strings together and it'll be 1, 2. So I hit run and it becomes 1, 2. So if I wanted to add, like, say first name 1 plus number 2, since it's a string, I can do that. And that's going to be first name 1, Joe, and then it's going to add number 2, so Joe 2. So when I hit run, I got Joe 2. Now if this was an integer and I had it like this, that's not going to work, because it's going to try to concatenate a string to an integer and it's not going to like that. As you see, I get an error in it. So it can't concatenate a string to an integer. It needs to be a string to a string. So it has to have the quotes around it if you're going to concatenate two strings together like that. Once again, to go over what we learned in the video today, we learned about comments. So comments are ignored by the compiler and ignored by the output. They start with a hash or a number sign, and the entire line is ignored. The second way to do comments is if you do 3 quotes. Anything in between those 3 quotes before they end is considered a comment. It's technically a string, and that's why it doesn't print it out. Okay, we learned about naming variables. So we don't want to use spaces, we don't want to use reserved words, and we want to start with a letter. You don't want to start with a number, just start it with a letter. Okay. Reserved words like import and print and other functions in Python cannot be used for variables. The different basic types of variables are strings, integers, floats. Strings are any combination of ASCII or numeric if you're not adding or doing any type of multiplication on them. Integers are whole numbers. Floats are numbers with decimals. And then the type is a function that shows you what type of variable you have. We learned about adding or concatenating variables. So when you use the plus sign with strings, it's called concatenating. So it pushes the 2 variables together, creating 1 variable. So what we did here is we created full name, and that's a combination of Joe plus this space plus the last name, which was Smith. And then we did it with numbers as well. It's adding the numbers when they're actually numbers, like this. So that number 1 plus 2 is 3. But if I made those strings like this, then it becomes 1 concatenated with 2 is 1, 2 is the output. Thank you for watching the video.